Warning, two extremely dangerous criminals escaped from prison today in upstate New York. Two white men. We will send you pictures. Be safe. When this happened, we were just kind of like, okay, like, why are we still doing this? What's up, everybody? My name is Kyle. I'm a huge hiking nerd, and if you are a hiking nerd yourself, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel as well to see more hiking, backpacking, nerdy freaking content. On my channel and other hiking, backpacking, whatever channels as well, there's always a pretty heavy emphasis put on success. You know, how to be successful in your thru hike, tips and hacks and all this shit. That's not what this video is going to be about. This video is going to be about failure. This video is going to be the 2 times that I quit thru hikes. No one likes to talk about times they like fucked up and things they failed at, but that's what we're going to be doing here nonetheless. Like I said, there have been 2 thru hikes that I started with the intention of completing, obviously, that I did not succeed at. And we're going to be going through the stories. We're going to talk about what happened and what I took away from it. And of course, you know, transitive property, that means you can take things away from these stories as well. Now, this first thru hike that I quit, that I failed at, was an attempt at the Vermont Long Trail. Now, I am from Vermont. I still live in Vermont, and the Long Trail is near and dear to my heart. However, this first experience I ever had on it was just really fucking shitty. Like, I'm just gonna say it. So this was my first ever thru hike attempt. And not only that, but it was also my first backpacking trip. And not only that, but I was also 16. I just finished my sophomore year of high school when this failed attempt happened. I had gone on a few day hikes prior to this, and I had learned about the Long Trail and the Appalachian Trail and all this thru hiking stuff. And I was like, yeah, I can do that, right? And so once school ended, my buddy Caleb and I decided that we were gonna head down to North Adams, Massachusetts. For those of you that don't know, the Long Trail here in Vermont runs from the Massachusetts border all the way up the state to the Canadian border. It's about 272-ish miles long. And yeah, we were going to just try to hike the whole thing. And one thing I need to stress again here is we were 16 years old. We were not only inexperienced backpackers, but we were also just inexperienced humans. Like,
we're packing up and then we're gonna hit the trail, and my camera's running out of battery, so I'm gonna not film very much. So hopefully the next clip will be of us walking to the car.
And neither one of our parents had any role whatsoever in this thru hike, so the idea was ours. All the planning was done by us, all the logistics, everything. It was all us. 2 goofy 16-year-olds trying to hike one of the most difficult long distance trails in the country. So we made it into the woods, and we were going up something called the Pine Cobble Trail, which is like the mini approach trail to get to the start of the Long Trail. It's just a couple miles long before you hit that Vermont-Massachusetts border, and it's pretty steep at the beginning. Not like the most steep thing I've done like now, but at the time, like, it seemed pretty damn steep. And honestly, I knew within the first half mile that there was absolutely no way that I was going to be able to thru hike this freaking trail. Like I said, this was my first backpacking trip, so all of like the beginner mistakes that people make when it comes to gear, I certainly made. My pack was way too heavy. It was probably about 40 pounds fully loaded up, and I know some Boy Scout out there has probably carried twice that, and
no, it's not that bad.
But it was pretty heavy, and honestly, it's still probably the heaviest pack that I've ever carried to this day. And to make matters worse, my friend Caleb, sorry Caleb, I'm gonna throw you under the bus here, he kind of wanted to do this at like a faster pace than I would have preferred, I guess. He was probably in a little bit better shape than me, and he was also just like not in the right like headspace mentally, I think. Because Caleb wanted to hike at like a pretty fast pace, we ended up doing like 14 miles our first day, and like now I could probably go hike 14 miles. Like, it wouldn't be easy, but it wouldn't be like that difficult. But again, first backpacking trip ever. It was not fun at all for either one of us, and my feet were really starting to like become just shredded at this point. We crammed the 2 of us into Caleb's Fly Creek UL2 tent, which, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is not very, it's a 2-person tent, but it's not really a 2-person tent. Got absolutely no sleep that first night, and then the second day, Caleb decided that 14 miles wasn't enough, and we should do 17 miles instead. Now, I remember trying to push back on this at first. I was like, bro, like, there's no way. Like, I'm not doing 17 miles right now. And there was these other southbound Long Trail hikers that were camping with us, and they were, you know, their last day pretty much. They were just about to finish the trail, and they were like super stoked, and so they were like, "Oh, it's not that bad. Like, you guys, 17 miles, like you can definitely do it." And what was I gonna like try to stand up against my friend and these other like hikers that had just finished the trail pretty much that we're trying to do? Like, no, of course not. And so eventually I caved in. I was like, all right, 17 miles, like, it, like, just whatever, like, let's try it. And what followed was probably the most painful, both physically and mentally, day in my entire life. God. And by the end of that second day, like, my feet were absolutely destroyed. Like, I'm not just talking like blisters. Like, there was literally like layers of skin peeling off my feet, just like red, just bleeding. Like, it was absolutely awful. I later found out that I pretty much like broke my toe on this hike, and I also ended up getting like a toenail like thing. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but like a few months after this, I ended up getting like a really bad ingrown toenail and had to get it like like my toenail like pretty much like chopped off. It was a mess. Like, my feet were that's what I'm trying to. It wasn't long after we had stopped and had dinner and stuff that we both kind of looked at each other and we were like, yeah, fuck this. Like, we're not gonna keep hiking. We woke up that next day. I pretty much limped another 8 miles until we got to the first road. Somehow we like hitchhiked into like a town. Like, we didn't even know where we were going. Like, literally the first car that drove by, we just like please pick us up. And I think the dude just saw these like stupid like beat up high school kids, and he was like, all right, like, I gotta help these like kids out. And so he brought us into Stratton Village, and I called my dad. I was like, hey dad, yeah, come pick us up. And my dad is an absolute saint, because when I called him just on a moment's notice, just like that, he dropped everything and he got in the car and drove across 2 states to come bail us out. He was not mad. Again, I'm in high school here, so I was kind of worried, like, gonna be mad or whatever. He wasn't mad. He wasn't disappointed. In fact, when he picked us up, he was smiling as wide as can be. And he probably was like waiting for that call. Like, he probably knew that like we weren't gonna actually finish this trail. But so, takeaways from this failed thru hike attempt. I think a lot of these takeaways are like the pretty obvious like beginner mistakes, but it's not gonna hurt to go through these. So, number one, most obvious, was just my gear was trash. I feel like beginner backpackers, like your first time backpacking, you're not going to ever nail like your gear setup at the very beginning, like the first time like that. But there were some pretty obvious things I did that if I had just researched a little bit more, I probably could have avoided them. For instance, I was literally carrying an entire fucking roll of duct tape, like literally probably 5 pounds worth of duct tape. Like, what the hell are you going to do with that much freaking duct tape? And the other like really embarrassing like shitty thing that I did, literally I was hiking in dress socks, like not Darn Tough, not Smart Wool, not even like Walmart knockoff like merino wool bullshit. Like, I was literally hiking in dress socks. Like how did I think, like, oh my God, it's absolutely ridiculous. And another big mistake that I made on this hike, again, because it was my first time trying to thru hike, is I just had false expectations going into the hike. And if you've watched any of my like AT prep videos, you've probably heard me talk about this. You know, I'll link a couple of those up there right now, but I just had watched YouTube videos and like seen social media and this stuff, and so I hadn't really hiked yet. I'd never backpacked, and so I just had a false, kind of skewed idea of what thru hiking was going to be like. And the last takeaway from this failed attempt is, again, something I've talked about in other videos. I wasn't hiking my own hike. I was following Caleb, basically. He wanted to hike it fast, and so, you know, I tried to talk him out of it, but I didn't really put up that much of a fight. There is a happy ending to this story, though. After that failed attempt, I realized, like, okay, I need to, like, slow down here. I still wanted to complete the trail. Somehow, like, breaking my toe and absolutely destroying myself didn't, like, dissuade me. And so I ended up settling for, like, a section hike instead of a thru hike of the Long Trail, and I was able to complete the Long Trail in sections with a different buddy, again, sorry Caleb, over the next year. And then in 2016, I went back and I attempted another thru hike of the Long Trail, and this time I freaking crushed it. I was successful, And that felt really good and honestly really prepared me for the Appalachian Trail, which I did 2 years later in 2018. And so my next failed thru hike attempt was a few years later in 2015. So my friend Dan and I were attempting to thru hike the Northville Placid Trail in the Adirondacks. If you've listened to my podcast Trail Tales, you've heard this story before, probably a couple times, honestly. But yeah, this story is just kind of ridiculous. So I'm gonna have to have another beer for this one just to get through this. So the Northville Placid Trail is a lot less known than the Long Trail, let alone the Appalachian Trail. So we were going to do about a 120-mile thru hike on the Northville Placid Trail. It's mostly just a water trail. So you're going from lake to lake, pond to pond, and you're crossing lots of rivers. Because of that, it's a relatively flat trail. So I didn't really think it was going to be that difficult, honestly. I was like, the Long Trail is way more climbing. I mean, it's really not even close. And like, it just didn't seem that bad to me. And boy, was I wrong. Dan and I had just finished our freshman year of college, and we had like a week and a half of time between when the semester ended and when we had to start our summer jobs. And so right then, beginning of June, that's when we were going to hike. Like, we pretty much had no choice. Now, if you've ever hiked in the Adirondacks, you're probably thinking like beginning of June is a bad idea. Like, this is a terrible time of year to hike in the Adirondacks for two main reasons. The first one is mud. I mean, up here in the Northeast, like June 1st was when we started. The beginning of June is like still mud season. So the trails were going to be wet. Like, the trail was just like absolutely destroyed. And the second reason why it's a bad time of year is because the bugs are absolutely horrendous on this trail. Literally, like when we first got out of the car to start this trail, it was just pissing. Like, it was just pouring rain. Like, Dan's dad dropped us off at the start of the trail, and like he didn't even get out of the car. It was raining so hard. Like, he didn't like get out and like wish us well or like, you know, hug his son or anything like that. He just was like, all right, like go, like off into the freaking rain, you guys go. And it was a terrible way to start the hike. We are on the Northville Placid Trail. It is June 1st, 2015. We're doing a thru hike. Done about 7 miles so far. Didn't film at all because it's raining, but yeah, Northville Placid Trail. Let's go. It let up a little bit over the next few days, but like it was just still not good weather. It was cold. It was kind of off and on rain, so we never really fully dried out. And that, coupled with the bugs and the mud, like I said, and the fact that we literally didn't see a single fucking hiker on this entire trail pretty much, because everyone else was smart enough not to hike at the time of year that we did.
Still haven't seen a single backpacker the whole time we've been out. Day 5. Might rain, hopefully not. We'll see.
All those factors combined just made for a super miserable experience. I mean, we made it about 9 days in, and on that 9th day, things started to look up a little bit. We had gotten some trail magic the night before. It was sunny that 9th day. The trail was on a new section, like they just built this section of trail. And so it was just like better maintained, and things were starting to look up. We made it to a place that night called Terrell Pond. That night, for the first time in those 9 days, I had cell service. I guess I was 19 at this point, still living at home while I wasn't at school, and so my mom was very curious. Honestly, I still check in with my mom, like even to this day when I'm hiking. I got no shame. Smash the like button for my mom. And so for the first time on this trail, I was able to send her a text and check in. That was another like good thing. It was a beautiful, beautiful campsite. Things were looking up is what I'm trying to say here. And then I got a text back from my mom, which kind of ruined everything. If you've ever heard of the Trek before, really popular thru hiking backpacking blog, I actually wrote a story for them a number of years ago about this. And so I have a screenshot that I saved for the article of this text that she sent me. So let me read you what she wrote. Warning, 2 extremely dangerous criminals escaped from prison today in upstate New York. 2 white men. We will send you pictures. Dad wanted me to alert you. Be safe. Now, if you're not from New York State, the term upstate New York means anywhere north of New York City. And I don't think my mom understood this at the time. Again, love you, Mom, but I don't think she understood this. I think what she thought this meant was northern New York, where we were in the Adirondacks, but I didn't really realize that at the time. So I was reading this text and I was like, upstate New York. Okay, well, where, like, that's such a huge, like, it could literally be like in the Adirondacks, or it could be all the way in like Buffalo, like 5 hours from where we were. I texted her back. I was like, okay, well, where in New York did this happen? It took her like 2.5 hours to reply to that text. And I'm just sitting there this whole time, just like, you know the feeling before when you're like waiting for an important text. You're just like every 5 minutes checking your phone, and it was just really stressful. I was like, what the fuck is going on? I should also say at the time I didn't have a data plan on my cell phone. I only had texting, so I couldn't just like Google it. Shortly before she replied, my friend Dan was like, I went on a field trip when I was in high school to a prison called Dannemora, which is in the Adirondacks, not very far from where we were. He told me that Dannemora was a maximum security prison, where they keep like dangerous like criminals and all this stuff. And shortly after we kind of started to speculate about this, my mom texted me back, and yeah, Dannemora was the prison that she was talking about. Through a little bit of Google Maps magic, I was able to calculate that we were roughly, I think, about 45 to 50 miles south of where the prison was. But the trail that we were hiking kept going north, and at the end of our hike, assuming we had continued, we would have been within like 20 miles of the prison, which obviously is like within a reasonable distance that these guys could have traveled. Those of you that live in either New York State or just anywhere in the Northeast might remember this. Honestly, it was like national news. It was a really big story too. So this was a maximum security prison. Both these guys were convicted murderers. This was like some Shawshank Redemption bullshit. Like they straight up like cut like the wall and like came out of a manhole. Like this was like some serious shit. Now this story is kind of embarrassing because like there's still like a pretty low chance, obviously, that like we were going to run into these guys. After the miserable past days that we'd had, when this happened, we were just kind of like, okay, like why are we still doing this? And so we decided that night that we were going to bail the next day. Again, my dad picked us up and we bailed. We quit. We were about 30 miles short of completing the trail. We had hiked about 90 miles to the spot that we got picked up at. So we were like really close this time. It wasn't like the long trail attempt where I was like 2.5 days in. We just lost all desire to keep going. And with that said, we're going to get into some of the takeaways for this trail. I think the biggest thing that I learned from this hike is just you have to expect the unexpected. I mean, how was I supposed to know that like two convicted murderers were gonna, like, I'd never even heard of this prison. And that's the thing, like, you can't anticipate things like this, but you have to just like roll with the punches and really know why you're hiking. And I kind of just touched on my second takeaway, which is you should know why you're hiking. I didn't really have very much of an incentive to continue on the Northville Placid Trail here. All it took was some bad bugs, some mud, and a couple escaped murderers to make me want to quit the trail. And I think if I had gone into the hike a little bit more determined, maybe with a little bit more of like a fire under my ass to actually finish this trail, then I would have been successful. With that said, I am planning on going back this upcoming fall, which is a long time from now. Injury is the only thing that's going to stop me from hiking this trail, because now I have an even bigger incentive to complete this trail besides just wanting to complete it, because yeah, I got to redeem myself, folks. And the last takeaway from this experience is f*** you, Richard Matt, and f*** you, David Sweat. If you watched all the way to this point and you haven't subscribed yet, you need to smash the subscribe button right now and also hit that like button as well. Hopefully this was interesting at worst and helpful at best. Thanks for watching.